Welcome to Beyond the Breakwater, where just beyond the crashing waves of fear, discomfort, and doubt lies the greatest potential for life transformation. We want to guide you into the open waters where the calculated risk you take becomes the turning point for you or your organization to thrive. So draw up your anchors and prepare for departure in this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater. Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Breakwater. I am Lyndsay, and I have Ed and Matt with me today. We are just going to keep rolling with the same discussion of Gen Z. We're going to be talking about boomers, millennials, all the different generations that are represented in the church, and kind of how the church responds to maybe some of those tensions. What is Gen Z exactly looking for? And all of that. But before jumping in, and on the topic of Gen Z, I learned a new term this weekend. Okay. It's called, they say, fax no printer.
That's right.
Yeah. Have you heard that, Matt?
No.
Have you heard that, Ed?
I don't have a clue what it means. I'm thinking fax and I'm thinking printer.
Yeah. Okay. How do you think?
Yeah. Interpret.
Yeah. Use it in a
Context
sentence.
Clues.
Yeah.
Use it in a sentence. What do you think they would say that to?
Well, I think fax is either FAX or FACTS. So, I mean, do you mean fax of something?
Okay. Okay.
I don't know.
You're on the right track.
You're putting me on the spot here.
I know. Matt, if you had to use it in a sentence, how do you think Gen Z would say it?
All right. Let's see.
We want the fax.
Yeah. Just saw T Swift last night in concert. Fax no printer.
Wow. That was a lot of buzzwords.
I know.
T Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah. But no, this is valuable for our listeners because I'm sure a lot of people want to relate to Gen Z. And so what I learned that fax no printer means is like they'll say it in like true. Like, oh yeah, true, fax. Like you say, Gen Z's awesome. And then I would say like, yeah, fax no printer. And what they did is they took like true and like turned it into like fax, like FACTS, factual. And then they shifted it to fax, FAX.
So creative.
And then for some reason they attached no printer at the end of it. So now like that is just something.
See, my
that
issue with this is I don't even know if Gen Z knows what a fax is.
I know. And yeah, this is true.
See, I'm still caught up on what you talked about later about the person who was told to take their mouse and run it across. What was it? Run it across the screen? Yeah,
A Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, that movie. If you haven't seen it, it is the son educating the dad. He says, like, drag the mouse across the screen. He picks up the whole mouse and puts it physically on his computer screen. Drags it across the screen. He goes, it's not working.
Just brilliant intercultural and intergenerational commentary. Yeah, just wonderful.
So this is going to be a great discussion today, clearly. Hopefully we haven't lost anyone. But Ed, I will turn it over to you. What are some of the questions that are just burning in your mind from the last time we talked?
Well, it's not, I don't know if it's burning in my mind. I think I'm just trying to get to the bottom of and trying to understand more. I mean, I went back and listened to the last three discussions that we've had about boomers, millennials, boomers, Gen Z. Gen X is kind of funny because they really are like the forgotten group, and we haven't even touched on them. But it seems like we're getting closer, but we're not there yet, which is why I want to hang in this place for a while. Because I don't feel like as a boomer generation, we're really understanding where Gen Z's coming from. I think there's a lot of indicators, but I think we're struggling just a little bit. Maybe I'm just speaking on behalf of boomers to say, what's the heart behind it? What's the mindset behind it? Like fax no printer. What's the heart behind it? What's the heart? What's And I know it's just an expression, but it's not. There's something behind it. And what's the heart behind it? And I think that's what you were telling us. So let me just throw this out, and I'm just going to kind of steer us to see if I can peel the layers back. That's what I'm all trying to do. Talk about, from your perspective, what do you think the tensions are between the boomer generation and the millennial generation, or the boomer generation and Gen Z? Because I think there's a tension mark there, and I feel it. And I don't know if it's a lack of understanding, a lack of culture. What is it? There's a tension.
Specifically in the church or just in general?
I'll just open that wide open because maybe we'll get to something, whether we go through the church model looking at it or whether we go from the outside looking in.
Okay. Well, Matt, do you feel that tension at all? Like you're in the millennial, I'm in like borderline, can teeter on either side. Like, do you feel a tension?
I think I feel a tension with respect to different things. I think I've seen with a boomer generation looking down at the millennial generation and saying, with regard to home ownership or going through college, and our rebuttal is, when you were growing up, college was like $1 a semester, and you could pay for it, and you worked your tail off, and you made it happen. We can't. We could work our tail off. We'd still be in mountains of debt. And so it's like maybe a refusal to recognize the economy has shifted dramatically from when they were in a season of building wealth, and now we are properly in the season of wealth building and family building, and having a time of it, because it's really difficult in today's economy to do the same thing that a boomer would have accomplished, 40 years ago or 30 years ago. It's just tough. It's just a tough environment. I feel like that's probably one of the things that a millennial would look at a boomer and be like, man, you don't get it. There are some things that are the same and some things that are so different. You're just not seeing it. You're not engaging with it. And then there's things like a more frivolous thing like technology. And to me, it's just like, it's just a button. It's just click, move the mouse across the screen. What do you mean? And there are a span. I recognize that in the boomer generation, there are some more technology friendly people and more or less, but it can be frustrating in a day and age, like with church moving into using technology in a more robust way and more automated way. And then there's the rebuttal is like, I don't get it, or it's so impersonal. I'm just like, but this frees me up to be more personal with you. So there's a disconnect and a tension that's hard to surmount and get past, because why don't you just phone call me? Because I don't have the time, Nancy. No offense, Nancy. Sorry.
We love you, Nancy.
But it's just straight up. I want to do things quickly, and it's like there's a disconnect.
Yeah, I think you're kind of speaking to like the there's a value that you have as like a millennial too, and like maybe there's just a disconnect there of like a lack of recognition of that. And I feel like from like my side too, in that regard, it's I don't know, like people look at Gen Z or millennial and you hear a lot, I think, of the shadow side of each generation of like, oh, millennials classic. Like they just want to show up to work and get paid the top dollar. Like they just want a pat on the back for participation. And I'm like, I don't want that at all. Like I put in the hard work to get there. Or like Gen Z, like, oh, they have a short attention span. Like, oh, classic. They don't know how to socialize with anybody because all they can do is look at their phones. And that's all I feel like I'm hearing is the rattling around of those like ideas, and not giving any type of like, I see you as a person and validate like this is what you need. And so I even can just see, like I led a small group that had, I mentioned it in our previous episodes, of like having multi-generations in this group. And like at the first night talking with some of the like the 50, 60, 70-year-olds, it's like they had and then we had some high schoolers in the group too. And like the older generation was like, okay, like I don't know how this is going to go. And naturally, like at the beginning when they all paired off in twos, it's like the high schoolers would be paired together and the older would be paired together. And by the end of it, it was like an intermixing, and the older generation had told the younger ones like, wow, like you guys totally like rocked my world of what I viewed like high schoolers as, and you just gave me like such a hope. And it was really good to have you guys in this discussion and hear your insight and your like what you go through on a daily basis. And I think that was just like a beautiful piece of recognizing more than just the shadow side of Gen Z. And so I think in regards to tension, that's like a little bit of what I'm feeling is, or like sensing, is that there's not much like space for ownership or a voice for Gen Z, because we are so overshadowed by the label of that shadow side. Does that make sense?
It does. You guys are talking about technology. Let's just unpack that one a little bit. Because as you're talking, I think it's interesting coming from really three different perspectives. For us, I mean, for me, technology has always been there. So, I mean, I know that's really broad, but we have so much more technology today than we did, when I was younger. So I think boomers and above are trying to learn it. I know my folks have really struggled with it. I watch them. Just computers have been like a struggle for them all along. I mean, I had to laugh one time when my mom got a phone finally, and she wrote me this entire email in the subject line.
Yep.
So there's a learning curve of wanting to use the technology, but kind of struggling with it. Then I think when you go down a little bit, maybe more where I'm at is using the technology in a way that's going to really help me, but I don't want to spend so much time on it because it's a tool to really help me. I think when you go a little bit more, Gen X, and probably Matt, where you are, it's become very comfortable for you using it, and you're using it a lot more. But I think from a boomer's perspective, we're watching all of this time spent on technology, but not necessarily seeing what we might call productivity, because there's nothing being produced in technology, but a lot of time consuming. So I think my generation is a little bit more sensitive to, you spend all this time, but nothing came of it. Where you can say, oh, but a lot came of it. But I think it's two different perspectives. One, I mean, you can spend all day on your phone, and a boomer would go, but what did you do? Well, I did all this stuff on there. Okay, but what did you do? I didn't do anything. From your perspective, maybe did a lot. And then I think, Lyndsay, where you're coming from, because it was so natural, like, this is not a tool. This is actually almost connected to who you guys are. I mean, parents are putting technology into the hands of babies, and where before it was, for me, it was just like you put them in front of a TV and you put a video in, really a video, not a DVD, a video. And you had videos and you would use them until they wear out, until you get all the lines across the screen. And I mean, that was what we did. So it was a tool used differently. And I don't think it's a tool for you. I think it's almost like an extension of who you are. So I think we're looking at the same thing, but I think it is harder. And there really are some questions in here, but I'm just coming from, I see the different perspectives of I do a lot of technology, but there comes a point of, okay, this is now, I almost feel like this is costing me more, producing less of what I'm trying to accomplish. So pause. I don't want to go deeper in it because it's really taking me away from where I think my gifts are and what I want to do. So for you guys, that's probably completely foreign. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a question in there, but maybe just respond to that, because I can really see how it all has changed everything.
Can you clarify the point of, like you had said, you use technology, but there's nothing that is produced from it? Like, are you just meaning because we're just like wasting time on our phones, or like, what do you mean by that comment?
I think it's different for every person depending on what they're doing.
Okay.
There's a lot of gamers.
Okay.
What's coming out of gaming? And I know we have esports now, and I know we have all those kinds of things, but I think from a boomer, they're looking for productivity because that's how they were wired. Coming out of, after the Great Depression, I mean, World War II, I mean, all those kinds of things. Productivity, what are we producing? What are we manufacturing? What are we accomplishing? What are we building? So I think a boomer is coming from the standpoint of building.
Yeah. I think maybe that is a misconception or
Probably.
like misunderstanding, because I view technology as like, yes, you can for sure waste a lot of time on it and just be on there for hours. And it's like, what did you do? And you're like, yeah, I just scrolled for a while. There is always that. But I think like it is incredibly helpful for productivity too. I mean, I think of something as simple as like, let's talk about maps and navigation. Like,
yes.
we made this video and it was supposed to, it was like a kind of a satirical, funny thing, but it's incredibly true. And like my dad played this like grandfather on it. And this is just very true of who he is. And so like in any given day, it's like, hey, I'm gonna run up to Meyer real quick and grab something. And he's like, well, let's sit down, let me show you where it's at. And he gets out a paper and he draws all of the corners that I'm going to pass, different landmarks, and you're going to go past Walgreens, and then you're going to go past Napier Road. That is spelled Napier. And then on the right, you're going to see a cemetery. Go past that 2 miles north, and then turn left, hang a left and then you'll see Walgreens, and it's like 2 miles down the road. And meanwhile, that takes him like 30 minutes to explain, literally drawing out all of these things, gives me the piece of paper. What I do with the paper is I tuck it in my pocket, keep it for a little keepsake, and then plug in my phone where I'm going to go.
What a nice trinket. Yeah.
And
Nice
so
drawing.
it's like that, I think, is just very, it parallels a lot, I think, of what we use technology for, where it's like, okay, we could save that whole like 30 minutes to an hour of you explaining to me where we had to go. And I can, in less than 10 seconds, pull up, and like time is money. And I've just like, I think, learned that a lot as I've been like getting older and having more responsibilities, is like, how can I automate this to put more time back into my schedule, increase the productivity of that, multitask, do a couple different things at once. So I don't know, Matt, would you agree, disagree?
Yeah, I do. I think the thing with the technology, I think some people perceive it to be, or maybe an older generation, oh, this is so impersonal. Whereas just fresh off of a meeting I'm coming from today, sat down and we're talking about a new thing that lots of churches use called Planning Center Services. It's a really great tool to manage your volunteers and send out invitations, and it's a great kind of simplified two-way communication road of knowing who can volunteer, how often would they like to, and so on and so forth. So some would say, well, that's impersonal. I'm just getting an auto-generated email. I see it completely different. I see this as an opportunity to, whereas otherwise I would be spending hours sending out emails, coordinating with people individually, whatever that would have to entail. I see this as I've just automated this entire process. Now I get to spend more time in ministry with these people.
Yeah.
And that's what a huge ad. That's great. I love that. And so it's just these things, a tool in the hand to increase time, number one, and number two, it increases the potential for relationship. Now, I'm sure there's a way that you could do that in a way that's quite impersonal, and I think that's a risk. But when used well, I see technology as like in automations and different things. This is, time is money. It creates more time for me to do other things that are more meaningful to me and also be more meaningful for us, the two persons who are using the technology to communicate.
Go ahead. Do you think that we are speaking like well on behalf of our generations, or do you think that we are like the rare unicorn that's like nobody else thinks like that?
There's probably some unicorn aspects to me. Yeah, there may be a horn growing somewhere. Hopefully the forehead. But I don't know. I don't know exactly where I would speak more in like generalities and where I probably am more uniquely me. Like I have a friend who's never technology, doesn't even barely know what, but like we're the same age.
Yeah. I think that's true. And yeah, I think, because I'm just thinking too, I'm like, is everybody our age using technology this way? Do they view that?
And many probably it's a range.
Bag.
It's like, that's why categories are of anything. Put a category of anything, and you're just speaking in way too broad of brushstrokes for some people, and you're going to hit most. That's why it's a box. Why it's a category, but you can't hit everybody possibly.
Ed, why do you think that this is an important discussion?
Well, I was thinking about that because I think it impacts how we lead church and lead the church. I mean, I'm going back to your maps, and that's where I paused for a minute, because you're right. You can just put the address in and it'll take you right there. I love that. But I can't tell you how strange it is to not know where I'm at. Because I kind of like know where I'm at. And so you can zoom out, zoom in. But while you're driving, you're zooming out, you're zooming in. Everybody's on their phone while they're driving. Nobody knows where anything is. So you made me smile when you said your dad's like, go past the cemetery, go this all the way. Because he's noticing his surroundings, because we didn't have those tools. And so when you don't have those tools, then you really get to know where everything is at. I just remember when I worked for my dad's in the appliance business, and we had one of the guys working for him. it was always the funniest thing because he knew where every fast food restaurant was in the city of Chicago. And so whenever you would say, well, how do I get there? He'd always say, go to the McDonald's and then go 2 more blocks and then turn left, or go to Taco Bell and then you turn right. And finally I caught on and I'm like, you know where every fast food joint is. He goes, yeah, actually I do. That's my reference to everything. And he was kind of a big guy, so I kind of understood. But it's interesting, like we just went down to Detroit a couple of weeks ago, and I just remember I don't have a clue where I'm at. I don't know where I'm at in Detroit. I don't know what I'm looking at. I don't know what part I'm in. I don't even know which way I'm going because, when you get your phone and it's just set for whichever way you're going, not north. So it's interesting just hearing you guys talk because those things matter. And here your dad was really building a relationship with you, and you could have just put the number in or the address in and gone.
Yeah.
So I think it's looking at the same thing, but it's looking at it from 2 different perspectives. And it's funny, Matt, when you talk about, you use technology to build more relationships. And I think sometimes the boomers are like, let's build a relationship and use the tools to help us along the way. Same place. We get to the same place. One is using the tool for the relationships. One is the relationship and then using the tool. So I just find it interesting. But I think this comes out, and this is where I just want to maybe ask, how do you see this impacting the church? And we can talk about Messiah. That might be easy because that's down to earth. So we're not talking theoretical. How does this impact the church?
Technology?
Sure.
Well, I think with technology, it's interesting. I'm sure there are people who are in my generation, so I can only speak for myself. But I think there is a reality that is become more plain for our generation and probably younger. That we're sort of realizing some of the things that we've done may not have been the most helpful. The things that, the tools that are very native to our expression of self, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all the things that kind of came out with us, and they just kind of became parts of how we express thoughts, feelings, ideas, and how often we spend on those things, and then take that into something like an online church, or take it into a, like, oh, isn't this great? We can still connect. And yet the very realities that sociologists and psychologists are observing is, number one, they're more depressed than ever and more isolated than ever. And so I think the caution that I feel personally, and I think maybe our generation is sort of like, hey, wait, time out. Yes, that may be the trajectory of the culture, but is that a good idea to move everything online? Because will that just mean that the Church of Jesus Christ becomes more isolated and more depressed?
True. Yeah.
Well, I sure don't want that. And yeah, there's some real cautions that I take into thoughtfully using technology to facilitate relationship, to facilitate connection. And I really, when it comes to online church, my theory, this is like, I don't know how broadly thought of this is. I think that online church isn't church, it's proclamation. You can proclaim and hear and learn and understand the gospel and the teachings of Scripture there, but you can't connect.
Yeah.
Some people may have a different opinion than me, but as I have seen it, the same argument has been made on any social media. We can connect. We're connecting right now, aren't we? I'm commenting in the thread. I don't know you. I don't know your story. I don't know who the heck you are. Your, username. That's all I know. And there's like I feel like you don't know me.
Okay, so let's just stay with that technology for a minute, because I think this is some of the big controversy. So if we're using technology for online worship, which is a great convenience, Lyndsay, why would anybody want to come to the church when you can go online and hear the greatest preachers ever produced in America or around the world?
Right. I think what could bring Gen Z to the church is that community aspect. Like, it is incredibly isolating and lonely. And I've talked about this before, but in very few churches are there places where young adults and Gen Z can like intersect and feel heard. And I think they've lost the art of like mentorship and
Churches or Gen Z?
Gen Z.
They
Gen
lost
Z.
the art of mentorship.
Being mentored?
Being mentored.
Okay.
Yes. Or asking or pursuing that. I think it is something that we deeply want, but we don't know we want it kind of thing. And I've mentioned
Well, that makes it really hard for a boomer.
Yeah.
But that's that comment. If you don't know what you want, how in the world am I going to know what you want?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Or I've heard from people in like leadership positions of maybe Gen Z saying like, hey, can we meet to talk and be mentored? And like they show up and they just like kind of sit there and expect like, okay, can you guide this? And this leader has been like, if you are Gen Z and you are listening to this, like, and you're asking for a mentor, like come to that meeting with questions and what you'd like to get from it, like know what you want from it. But I think kind of the danger that technology plays in that, or just like online church, is we do have an abundance of resources that can like be should be kind of like supplemental to our walk of faith and like gathering together and pursuing life together and hardship and struggles and bearing grief and like all of the things. But as we have these questions, rather than turning to people and people with wisdom and life experience, Gen Z is turning to like the online portion for things, which is incredibly watered down. It waters down whatever could have existed in person.
Okay, see, this is what I mean by tension. So as I'm listening to what you're saying, you know, I would almost conclude, and maybe this is my generation, well, why don't we watch and listen to the greatest preachers online, and then let's gather together and let's just figure out how to do all community then. And what would church look like if we did that? So it's sometimes hard, like, how do we navigate through this? And podcasts, I mean, this is a podcast. People listen to podcasts, but maybe not necessarily going to church to hear what their pastor, like, he's got a relationship, hopefully, with them. So I think you've got this relational component and you have this technology component. And I think this is where I think we're starting to get to the core. This is where they're starting to clash.
I don't know if I would agree with like Gen Z desiring to receive like worship and preaching online and then come for just like doing community together. I feel like there still is a desire to like show up in person.
Well, I didn't mean that against or towards Gen Z. I just mean if we have the greatest preachers, why would we go to a local church to hear our pastor who maybe not be so good at preaching? Why would we go there? Why don't we listen to the best of the best and be fed the best? Then what could church offer? So there's a level of why are we okay going to a church where we're not going to hear the best preaching, but we're getting good community? And this is where you've got, how do we balance the tools of technology and yet what the local church is about? And I think this is hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It comes to my ideas of ecclesiology and what is it to be church, and church is not content delivery. It's not, because that's not discipleship. Actually, I was reading a very interesting take on discipleship is that the way that the Great Commission is worded, go and make disciples, it sort of creates this metaphor almost of an industrial age of you take the raw materials of the worldly person and you put them on the conveyor belt of the church, and then you kind of bring down the big, thing that, and then you have this fully formed Christian, some assembly required, but we'll get that sorted. And every so often you'll get some help from the manufacturer, but not this relational thing. And the book is really advocating for not a assembly line vision, but you have kind of adventure hiking. You have people who are on your rope, literally connected to you, carabiner and everything. And it's a slow, methodical, not mass marketable kind of approach to doing life and living the Christian life, but you do it together. And Pastor Jim, he's not the best preacher, but gosh, he cares for me. And he has great wisdom, and I love to hear from him. And I'll listen to insert preacher here on a podcast, like, which I do. I'll listen to recordings from Timothy Keller, and I just love his preaching, and it really influences my thought and thinking. So it's like, I think in a world, I suppose, seeing everything else outside the local church as supplemental and not sole, that's healthy. Seeing as going to the local church, connecting with the people. I have a friend who would just say, like, sometimes the person, James K. Smith, who has written some books, has kind of quipped, like, sometimes the person that's really struggling with faith in life just needs to go to the Lutheran church down the road and have some old ladies love on them. Probably, yeah. Get out of your own little isolation and your turmoil and get into a place that people are going to love you. Yeah, I think that's the most hopeful vision, I think.
So we don't have a lot of time. I want to bring it back to our model. I think even what we're touching on, and it seems like the time always goes so fast. I mean, we're already 30 minutes into a podcast. I think Beyond the Breakwater is always out of your comfort zone. I think what we're also watching the church at large, meaning just, Matt, we've got a lot of pastor friends who are pastors, and it's hard for people to go beyond the breakwater and get out of their comfort zone. And we see that in pastors. And so we're also watching pastors retreating, like, I don't know how to do this, so I'm just going to do what I've always done. I don't know how to lead worship using technology except for a projector. And that's got to be high tech, right? Using a projector, and yet we're watching Gen Z go, can we ditch all the show and all the technology that's been used? See, it's so ironic. Like, we want to go back to simple. I mean, our worship leader commented yesterday that he's hearing a message over and over and over and over again. Simplify, simplify, simplify. Like, get rid of the technology and let's go back to simplified. So I think in our model, it's good we're talking about this, because you're either going to, it's a bad way to say it, get in the fight and go beyond the breakwater and be crazy uncomfortable. There was a time, when the church, as technology was coming out, podcasts were coming out, great preachers are coming out. People come to church and then they go up and agree and say, I was listening to this preacher this morning. He was really good. And you can't help but go,
So glad.
okay, I'm so happy for you. And you just go, okay, this is hard. Why are you here? And I know they were excited about it, but it's like, how do we balance the technology that people have at their fingertips? And how do we have a strong, meaningful ministry? And I was reading today, 28 Gen Z, 28% of them come once a month. And it goes down from there. It's the rare person that comes more than once a month. 30% have no religious affiliation. So we're dealing with, it doesn't matter what the church is doing if Gen Z's absent. So how do we bring Gen Z along? How do we bring millennials? I think are a little bit more, if they're going to be part of the church, they've got, their families are growing up, so they're coming to church, they're looking for more. I think Gen Z, young adults, singles, I think we're just experiencing, like, this is getting really harder than it ever has, because nobody really knows how to be in the same space from where they're both coming from. So that's what I would offer to everybody as they look beyond the breakwater. How about some final comments as we wrap things up? Lyndsay?
Wow. Well, I feel like I would like to jump into a discussion of, like, you just ended things in a way that is like, so what do we do about it? What's the solution? Like, I feel like we're just kind of talking about all the things that are, like, really tough and tensions, and just looking at it with, like, a helplessness. But I feel like you probably have some ideas. So I don't know. I'd love to get into the discussion like that and kind of brainstorm or talk through what would work, what wouldn't work.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but all I know is the millennials are coming out on top.
Fax no printer.
Fax no printer. Full circle. And with that,
without further ado, we'll see you next week.
And I'm still thinking about how to get that piece of paper in the fax machine.
See you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Beyond the Breakwater, a podcast of Elevate Community Ministries. Don't let the conversation stop here. You can email us at hello@beyondthebreakwater.org. We would love to chat with you, answer questions, plan a visit, and help you take your next step. We'll see you next week.